They laughed at her simple black dress, called her the help, whispered that she didn't belong in their world of diamonds and champagne. But when the groom stopped his own wedding, walked past his bride in her $1,000 gown, and dropped to his knees in front of the woman they'd mocked, the entire ballroom went silent. 3 words shattered everything. "You saved my life, boss." The woman they judged by her appearance? She was the billionaire who held all their futures in her hands. But here's the thing. Even if she wasn't, she still deserved their respect. This is a story about dignity, love, and the moment a family learned the hardest lesson of their lives. Stay with me, because what happens next will give you chills. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Elena. Elena stood in that ballroom wearing a simple black dress while everyone around her sparkled like diamonds. The groom's mother whispered just loud enough for people to hear. Did she come straight from cleaning houses? People laughed. They sipped their expensive champagne and stared at her like she didn't belong. But Elena stood there, holding the hand of James Richardson, one of the richest men in the city. To everyone in that room, she was just another nobody who got lucky. But wait until you hear what happens next. 3 years before that wedding, Elena had a completely different life. She was powerful. She was wealthy. She ran one of the biggest investment companies in the country. But she walked away from all of it. Why? Because she was tired. Tired of being the only black woman in every meeting. Tired of proving herself over and over. Tired of people questioning her every decision while her white colleagues got praised for doing half as much. So she left it all behind and disappeared into a quiet life. Her favorite place became a small bookstore in the corner of downtown. It wasn't fancy. The books were old and worn, the coffee was just okay, but there was a window seat that caught the afternoon sunlight perfectly. Elena would sit there for hours, reading books about history and philosophy, just being nobody special. No business meetings. No cameras. No one asking her for anything. Just peace. That's where James found her 6 months ago. He ducked into the bookstore to escape a rainstorm and saw this beautiful woman completely lost in a book about African history. When she looked up and smiled at him, he forgot he was supposed to be at an important business meeting. They started talking. Hours passed like minutes. He didn't know she used to be rich and powerful. She didn't know he was heir to the Richardson fortune. They were just 2 people connecting over ideas and dreams. Their love grew slowly, beautifully. James took her to small restaurants she recommended instead of expensive places. When he suggested flying to Europe, she said, "Let's take a road trip instead." They drove across the country, visiting small bookstores and talking until sunrise. It was the happiest James had ever been. Elena felt like she could finally breathe. She could finally just be herself. But reality has a way of crashing through even the strongest doors. One Sunday morning, James's phone rang. His mother's voice came through, sharp and commanding. "James, come to brunch today. Your sister has news." Before he could argue, she added, "Bring your friend if you must. We should meet her properly." The line went dead. James looked at Elena with worry in his eyes. She squeezed his hand gently. "It's okay," she said softly. "We always knew this day would come." The Richardson mansion looked like a castle. As they drove through the iron gates, Elena felt that old familiar weight settling on her shoulders. The weight she'd escaped 3 years ago. The weight of being judged before you even open your mouth. Brunch was set up on a huge terrace with white tablecloths and crystal glasses that caught the sunlight. James's mother, Patricia Richardson, sat at the head of the table. Her silver hair was perfect. Her smile looked sharp enough to cut. Next to her sat James's sister, Lauren, practically bouncing with excitement. "James," Lauren sang out. "You're here. And you brought." Her eyes swept over Elena with obvious confusion. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Elena," she replied, reaching out her hand. Lauren's handshake was weak, dismissive. "How lovely. James hasn't told us anything about you. What do you do?" Elena smiled softly. "I read a lot." Patricia let out a brittle laugh. "How charming. James, darling, sit here." She pointed to the seat next to her. Then she looked at Elena. "You can sit down there." She gestured vaguely to the far end of the table, slightly separated from the family. The placement was deliberate. It was a statement. "You don't belong with us." James's jaw tightened. "Mother." "It's fine," Elena interrupted gently. She'd fought bigger battles than this. She could survive one brunch. Lauren launched into her big announcement. She was getting engaged to a tech entrepreneur named David. The wedding would be huge. 600 guests. Designer everything. Coverage in all the magazines. It's going to be absolutely perfect, Lauren gushed. Only the best people, of course. Patricia's eyes slid to Elena. Family is so important at these occasions. People who understand our world. The insult hung in the air like poison. Throughout the meal, the small cuts continued. Patricia asked questions about Elena's family that assumed something was wrong with them. She complimented Elena's exotic features. She acted surprised that Elena went to a good university. You must be very talented, she said, as if it was shocking. When dessert came, Patricia leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elena, dear, I hope you won't take this wrong, but have you thought about what you'll wear to the wedding? These events have certain standards. Elena met her gaze steadily. I'm sure I'll find something appropriate. Of course, of course. I'm just saying, if you need any guidance. The sentence trailed off, leaving the insult complete. That evening, Elena's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Hi, Lauren here. Got your number from James. So excited you're coming to the wedding. I know our events can be formal, so I wanted to share some boutique links. These are what my friends and I love, just so you feel comfortable and don't feel out of place. Hope this helps. Below were links to the most expensive designer stores. Each dress cost more than most people earned in months. Elena read the message twice. The meaning was crystal clear. You don't belong here. Buy the right costume to pretend you do. Elena stared at that message for a long time. The words, so you don't feel out of place, echoed in her mind. Translation, you are out of place. Here's how to hide it temporarily. A bitter taste filled her mouth. But what she felt most wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. Deep, bone-tired exhaustion. She'd built her quiet life specifically to escape these games. These cruel little ways people establish who's on top and who's beneath them. With steady fingers, she typed back. Thank you for thinking of me, Lauren. I have my own style, but I'll keep your suggestions in mind. Looking forward to celebrating with you. It was polite. It was dismissive. It drew a line without giving Lauren the satisfaction of a fight. When she showed James the message later, his face darkened instantly. She did what? He grabbed the phone like the screen itself had insulted him. He read it, and a muscle in his jaw started twitching. I can't believe her. Before Elena could say anything, he was calling his sister. Lauren, what the hell was that message you sent Elena? Elena could hear Lauren's voice on the other end, defensive and shrill. Don't tell me you were just trying to help. James cut her off. Help with what? Did you think she doesn't know how to dress herself? It was condescending and insulting. There was a pause, then James's voice exploded. Embarrass the family? Are you listening to yourself? Elena could never embarrass me. But you, Lauren, right now you're embarrassing me profoundly. He hung up and turned to Elena, anger melting into regret. I'm so sorry, he said, sinking onto the couch. My sister is just shallow. There's no depth to her, so she judges everything by its surface. Please don't let it get to you. He meant it to comfort her. But the word shallow landed wrong. He saw it as a character flaw, a personal problem. He didn't see it for what it really was, a weapon. A tool of a system designed to keep certain people out. He loved her. She knew that. But in that moment, she felt the distance between them. The gap created by his privilege. He could see she was hurt, but he couldn't fully understand the nature of the weapon that had wounded her. Later that night, Elena stood in front of her closet. At the very back, hidden in garment bags, were the ghosts of her old life. Designer gowns, expensive jewelry, clothes from when her name commanded boardrooms. She could wear one. She could walk into that wedding dressed in the very armor Lauren worshipped. Beat her at her own game. The thought was tempting, but she pushed it away. To do that would be accepting their rules. Admitting their game had power over her. Instead, she chose the simple black dress. No famous label. No extravagant design. Just perfect fabric, perfectly cut. It was a quiet choice. A silent declaration. She would not change herself to please them. She would simply be herself, and let that be enough. The day of the wedding arrived. The Richardson Grand Hotel was less a building and more a monument to wealth and power. From the moment they stepped inside, Elena felt the air change. It grew thinner, colder. Everyone was watching, weighing, judging. Whispers followed them across the marble floor. Dozens of eyes looked over champagne glasses, cataloging her dress, her posture, her very presence next to James Richardson. She felt James's hand tighten around hers. He was nervous too. This was his world, but it was also a jungle. They hadn't walked 10 steps before Patricia and Lauren appeared. Patricia looked like a sculpture made of ice and diamonds. Lauren wore pre-wedding white, her smile stretched thin across her face. Patricia's gaze swept over Elena in a fraction of a second. A dismissal so complete it was more insulting than a glare. "James, darling, you're late." "Mother," he said carefully. "You remember Elena?" "Of course." The word was clipped. "Final." Lauren stepped forward with fake laughter. "Oh, James, you finally brought your friend." Her eyes crawled slowly down Elena's simple black dress. Theatrical pity dawned on her face. "Elena, that dress is so minimalist." "Very brave." The insult was perfectly delivered. Poison disguised as a compliment. Before Elena could respond, an older woman with a powdered face joined them, staring at Elena intensely. She leaned toward Patricia, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "My, her skin is quite dark, isn't it?" "Very different." Lauren's smile widened. She patted the woman's arm. "Oh, Aunt Helen, exotic looks are so in right now. So uniquely beautiful." The words hung in the air. Different. Exotic. Polite society code words for other. For not one of us. Elena felt heat rising in her chest. The familiar burn of fury. Beside her, James went rigid. His fists clenched white. A low sound rumbled in his throat. "That's enough." But then Elena's hand touched his arm. Light but firm. A silent command. He looked at her, confused, but she wasn't looking at him. Her gaze was fixed calmly on Lauren and the aunt. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly level. It carried a quiet authority that cut through the tension like a knife. She smiled at them serenely. "Thank you for the compliment," she said, meeting Lauren's eyes without fear. She turned the same calm gaze to the older woman. "I've always taken great pride in my heritage." The effect was instant. Their smirks faltered. Their attack had been neutralized by someone who refused to play the victim. They'd thrown their sharpest stones, and she'd simply caught them without showing even a scratch. They stood there speechless. The aunt coughed and mumbled about needing a drink, quickly disappearing into the crowd. Lauren's face showed stunned disbelief. But even though she'd won the exchange, Elena felt profoundly isolated. She could feel everyone's stares. Their whispers. She was an exhibit. A spectacle. James squeezed her hand, helpless. They were both trapped in this glittering cage. The ceremony began, and with it came another deliberate act of exclusion. An usher with a practiced smile led Elena and James not to the rows reserved for family, but much farther back. A section for business associates and distant connections. The message was clear. You are guests, but you are not us. Elena settled into her seat with strange calm. From this distance, she was no longer a participant. She was an observer watching a foreign ritual. She saw the elegantly dressed guests with their composed faces and recognized it for what it was. Not a celebration of love, but a merger of two powerful families. It was beautifully choreographed and perfectly artificial. James sat beside her, rigid and miserable. Then the groom appeared at the altar. David was exactly as handsome as expected. Perfect tuxedo. Perfect hair. But something was wrong. Tension coiled in his shoulders. His eyes kept flicking nervously across the crowd. He looked less like a man about to marry his love, and more like someone searching for something he'd lost. The music swelled. The doors opened. Lauren began her walk down the aisle, a cloud of white silk and satisfaction. David turned and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was rehearsed. A photograph of happiness rather than the real thing. As Lauren glided forward, David's gaze began to drift. It swept over faces with blank, unfocused quality, until it reached Elena. Then it stopped. The connection was sudden and jarring. David's eyes locked onto Elena from across the room. He squinted, his face showing intense concentration, like he was trying to place a familiar face in a wildly unexpected context. Elena, knowing she'd never seen him before, assumed it was mistaken identity. She offered a small, polite nod to break the stare. But he didn't look away. His eyes remained fixed on her. The polite nod went unreturned. A prickle of unease traced down her spine. The ceremony continued around this strange exchange. Lauren reached the altar, beaming and oblivious. The officiant began speaking, but Elena could hardly hear him. All she was aware of was the weight of the groom's unwavering stare. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A photographer was being escorted out by security, protesting loudly. "I'm with the newspaper. You can't throw me out. This is a public interest story. Lauren's smile froze. Patricia rose from her seat, fury barely controlled. Whispers intensified. Guests pulled out phones, filming the chaos. The photographer shouted one more time before being pushed through the doors. Richardson family discrimination. The black woman at table 47 was just called the help by your staff. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. All eyes turned to Elena. The blood drained from Lauren's face. Patricia's carefully constructed facade cracked. James shot to his feet, his voice cutting through chaos. That's a lie. Elena is my guest, my partner, and anyone who. But the damage was done. Phones were out everywhere. Social media was exploding. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Several high-profile guests, CEOs, politicians, celebrities, began quietly gathering their things and heading for the exits. A tech billionaire who'd invested heavily in Richardson Industries stopped at James's row. I'm sorry, James, but I can't be associated with this. Call me when your family sorts out their values. One by one, the power players left. The exodus was silent but devastating. Lauren stood at the altar, tears streaming, her perfect wedding crumbling in real time. David remained frozen, his eyes still on Elena, but now with dawning horror. Not at her, but at what was happening to her. Patricia rushed to the microphone, her voice shrill with desperation. Ladies and gentlemen, please. This is a terrible misunderstanding. Our family would never. But you did. Elena's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. She stood slowly. Every eye in the room turned to her. She walked down the aisle, not toward the exit, but toward the altar. James moved to follow, but she raised a hand, stopping him. This was her moment. When she reached the front, she turned to face the crowd. Her voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of 1,000 boardroom negotiations. My name is Elena Santos. 3 years ago, I was the CEO of Santos Capital Management, one of the largest venture capital firms in North America. A ripple of recognition spread through the crowd. The Santos name was legendary in finance, though Elena herself had been notoriously private. Rarely photographed. Never giving interviews. I walked away from that world because of moments exactly like this, she continued. Because in that world, I was always the only black woman in the room. Always the one who had to prove she belonged. Always the one whose credentials were questioned, whose authority was challenged, whose very presence was treated as an anomaly to be explained away. Patricia tried to interrupt. Miss Santos, we never meant. Elena's gaze silenced her. You meant exactly what you said and did. From the moment I walked into your home, I was assessed and found wanting. Not because of my character, my intelligence, or my accomplishments, but because of my skin and my refusal to perform wealth the way you demanded. She turned to Lauren. You set me links to expensive boutiques, not to help, but to remind me that I didn't meet your standards. Your mother seated me apart from the family like I was contaminated. Your aunt called me exotic as if I were an object in a museum. And your staff, whether you instructed them or not, called me the help. Lauren's face crumpled. I didn't know who you were. Elena's laugh was soft, bitter. And that's exactly the problem. You thought it was acceptable to treat me that way because you assumed I had no power. You assumed I was nobody. But the truth is, even if I had been a waitress or a teacher or an artist, I would have deserved your respect. She paused, letting the words sink in. Your family doesn't have a PR problem right now. You have a values problem. And no amount of money or social status can fix that. The ballroom was dead silent. Then, from the altar movement, David stepped forward, away from his bride. He walked down the steps and approached Elena. When he reached her, he did something that shattered what remained of the ceremony's dignity. He bowed. Not a casual nod, but a deep, formal bow of profound respect. When he straightened, his eyes were wet with tears. Miss Santos, he said, his voice shaking. 5 years ago, my startup was dying. I'd sent funding proposals to over 200 firms. Every single one rejected me. Except one. He turned to address the crowd, his voice growing stronger. Santos Capital gave me my first major investment. Not because of my connections. I had none. Not because of my pedigree. I'm a first-generation immigrant whose parents ran a small grocery store. But because Miss Santos saw something in my work that everyone else missed. Tears streamed down his face now. She saved my company. She saved my dream. Everything I have, this tuxedo, this wedding, my success, it exists because of her. And I just watched my future in-laws treat my greatest mentor like she was nothing. He turned back to Elena, his voice dropping to a whisper. But the room was so quiet that everyone heard. I'm sorry, boss. I should have recognized you sooner. I should have stopped this. Elena's expression softened for the first time. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You have nothing to apologize for, David. You didn't cause this. Then, from the back of the ballroom, a new voice rang out. But I might have prevented it. The crowd parted as an elderly man made his way forward, leaning on a carved wooden cane. Thomas Richardson, the family patriarch, James's grandfather, the man who'd built the Richardson empire from nothing. Patricia's face went white. Father, you should be resting. Be quiet, Patricia. His voice was still wrapped in authority despite his age. He walked until he stood directly in front of Elena. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, his eyes sharp and assessing. Then his face transformed. A smile of genuine warmth broke through. Roberto Santos's daughter, he said softly. I should have known. You have his eyes. Elena's breath caught. You knew my father? Knew him? Thomas laughed, rich with memory. He saved my life. He turned to address the assembled guests. 42 years ago, I was a young man trying to build a business in Sao Paulo. I was naive, arrogant, and I made a deal with the wrong people. When the contract went south and those men came for me with violence, not lawyers, it was Roberto Santos who hid me, who negotiated my safety, who got me out of the country alive. He looked back at Elena, his eyes glistening. I owed your father a debt I could never repay. He died before I could even try. And now I find his daughter in my home, treated like garbage by my own family. The shame in his voice was palpable. Father, we didn't know, Catherine began desperately. You didn't care to know. His cane struck the marble floor with a sharp crack. That's the problem, Patricia. You and Lauren have become so drunk on our family name that you've forgotten what it took to build it. Respect. Humility. Recognizing value regardless of packaging. He turned back to Elena. This time, this powerful man who commanded rooms and bent industries to his will bowed his head. Miss Santos, on behalf of my family, I offer you the apology you deserve. And I hope, though I have no right to ask, that you might tell me about your father. I've carried his memory for 4 decades. I'd like to know the man who raised the woman who clearly inherited his strength. Elena felt something crack open inside her chest. A dam she'd built 3 years ago suddenly failing. My father, she began, her voice thick with emotion, taught me that wealth without character is just decorated poverty. He taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but how they treat those who have nothing to offer them. She looked around the ballroom at the faces watching her with newfound understanding, newfound shame. I left the world of high finance because I was tired of being the only one. Tired of code switching, of making myself smaller, of watching white mediocrity get promoted while black excellence got scrutinized. I was tired of rooms where I was the diversity statistic, where my presence was tolerated but never truly welcomed. Her voice dropped, becoming almost intimate despite the hundreds listening. I just wanted to be seen, really seen. Not as a black CEO or a diversity win or an exotic curiosity. Just as Elena. Just as a woman who loves books and coffee and quiet mornings. She turned to James, who stood frozen, his face a landscape of emotions. James gave me that. For 6 months, I got to just be Elena. And it was the most peaceful 6 months of my life. Her voice softened. I didn't tell you because I wanted to know if you could love Elena before you knew about Santos Capital. I needed to know if what we had was real. She looked into his eyes. And it was. It is. James moved then, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. He took her hands in his voice rough with emotion. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I didn't understand. I'm sorry I brought you into this. You have nothing to be sorry for, Elena said gently. You loved me when you thought I was nobody. That's everything. Thomas cleared his throat. James, if you let this woman go, you're a fool. If you don't marry her, I'll disown you and adopt her instead. A shocked laugh rippled through the crowd, breaking some of the tension. But Thomas wasn't finished. He turned to Patricia and Lauren, his face hardening. As for you two, Patricia, you're removed from the board of Richardson Industries, effective immediately. Lauren, your trust fund is suspended for 1 year. You'll both spend that time volunteering with organizations that serve communities you've clearly learned nothing about. Father, you can't, Victoria began. I can and I have. His voice left no room for argument. He turned to David. Young man, you deserve better than this circus. If you want to call off this wedding, I'll personally fund whatever legal fees come from it, and you'll have my full support." David looked at Lauren, at her tear-stained face and trembling hands. Then he looked at Elena. "Miss Santos, what would you do?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I'd ask myself, is the person I'm marrying someone who brings out the best in me? Someone who shares my values? Someone I can respect, not just love?" David nodded slowly. He turned to Lauren. "I need time. I need to know if you understand why what happened today was wrong. Not because of who Elena is, but because of how you treated another human being." He removed his boutonniere, placed it gently on the altar, and walked out. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Guests rushed to leave, some to escape the scandal, others to position themselves for whatever fallout would come. Patricia collapsed into a chair, her perfect composure finally shattered. Lauren stood alone at the altar, her fairy tale wedding now a cautionary tale. James squeezed Elena's hand. "Can we go? Please." She nodded. Together they walked through the ruins of the ceremony, through the whispering guests and flashing phones. As they reached the doors, Thomas called out one more time. "Miss Santos." She turned back. "Your father would be proud of you. And if you ever want to talk about him, my door is open. You have family here, whether these fools recognize it or not." Elena's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak, and let James lead her out into the cool evening air. They sat in the car for a long moment, the silence between them vast and complicated. Finally, James spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand if you can't forgive them. I understand if you can't forgive me for putting you through that." Elena turned to him, really looked at him. She saw his pain, his shame, his love. "I don't need to forgive you, James. You didn't do anything wrong. You loved me. You defended me. You stood up to your family." She took his face in her hands. "But I need you to understand something. This isn't over. If we stay together, there will be more moments like this. More rooms where I'm the only one. More people who see my skin before they see me. Can you handle that? Can you stand beside me, knowing that loving me means fighting battles you'll never fully understand?" James's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be in rooms that don't value you. I don't want to be part of a world that makes you feel less than. Elena, I'm not asking you to fight those battles alone. I'm asking you to let me learn. Let me listen. Let me stand with you." He pulled out his phone, and right there in the car, he did something Elena hadn't expected. He posted a statement to his social media, James Richardson, heir to billions, with millions of followers. "Today I watched the woman I love be disrespected by my own family. I watched them treat her with casual cruelty because they judged her by her appearance rather than her character. I'm ashamed. I'm heartbroken. And I'm done with silence. If you're in my life, family, friends, business associates, you will treat Elena with respect, or you won't be in my life. Period. No more excuses. No more, that's just how things are. Love demands better. I demand better." He posted it without hesitation, then turned off his phone. "Whatever consequences come from that, I'll handle them. But I won't have anyone think I'm okay with what happened today." Elena felt something shift inside her. A wall she'd been holding up finally lowering. "Take me to the bookstore," she said softly. "What?" "Our bookstore. Where we met. Take me there." James started the car. They drove through the city in comfortable silence, the chaos of the wedding falling away with each mile. When they pulled up in front of the small bookstore, its lights were off, the closed sign hanging in the window. James started to say they could come back tomorrow, but Elena was already getting out of the car. She tried the door. Locked. She knocked. After a moment, the owner, Mr. Chun, appeared looking confused. When he saw Elena, his face broke into a warm smile. "Elena, what are you doing here so late? And so dressed up? Can we come in, Mr. Chun? Just for a little while." He looked at her face, saw something there that made him nod immediately. He unlocked the door and ushered them inside. "Stay as long as you need. I'll be in the back." Elena led James to their corner, the worn armchairs by the window where they'd first talked, where they'd fallen in love. She kicked off her heels, curled into her chair, and finally let herself breathe. James sat across from her, watching her come back to herself. "This is where I'm real," Elena said quietly. "Not at galas or boardrooms or weddings. Here, in places like this, with books and coffee and no pretense." She looked at him. "Can you love me here, James? In the small, quiet moments? Because this is who I am." James leaned forward, taking her hands. "Elena, I fell in love with you here. Every moment we've had in this bookstore, every conversation, every comfortable silence, that's what I want. Not the empire you walked away from. Not the power or prestige. Just you. Just this. Elena felt tears slip down her cheeks for the first time that night. Your family is going to hate me forever. Then they're not my family. You are. They sat there in the bookstore until dawn broke, talking about everything and nothing. About fathers and legacies. About the weight of names and the freedom of anonymity. About what it means to be seen and what it costs to be invisible. When the sun finally rose, painting the bookstore in soft gold light, Elena rested her head on James's shoulder. I'm tired of running, she whispered. I'm tired of hiding. But I'm also tired of fighting. Then don't, James said. Don't run. Don't hide. Don't fight. Just live. Just be. And I'll be right here beside you, learning, listening, loving you exactly as you are. Mr. Chin emerged from the back with 2 cups of fresh coffee. He set them down, gave Elena's shoulder a gentle squeeze, and disappeared again without a word. Elena picked up her cup, breathed in the familiar smell, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that the world would change overnight. Not hope that there wouldn't be more Patricius and Laurens. But hope that she could face them without losing herself. Hope that she'd found someone who saw her, really saw her, and loved what he found. So what happens now? James asked. Elena smiled. A real smile. The first of the night. Now, we drink our coffee. We read our books. We live our quiet life. And when the world demands we show up and fight, we'll fight together. Together, James echoed. And in that moment, in a closed bookstore as the city woke around them, surrounded by thousands of stories of love and loss and triumph and tragedy, they wrote the beginning of their own. Not a fairy tale where love conquers all, but something better. A real story where love gives you the courage to face all that can't be conquered, and the grace to find peace in the spaces between battles. Because dignity doesn't always win, but it always matters. And sometimes that's enough. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. Tell us in the comments. Have you ever been judged before people knew your story? Remember, true power doesn't need to announce itself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today.